Well, welcome everyone to this plenary event inside World Unity Week. I am genuinely and super excited about this conversation between Jonathan Granoff and Maria Espinosa. Let me tell you a little bit about Maria Espinosa, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and of Defense of Ecuador, and the former President of the UN General Assembly. Maria is an Ecuadorian poet, scholar, diplomat, and politician. Ms. Espinosa has held several leadership positions, serving as Minister of Foreign Affairs, of Defense, and of Cultural and Natural Heritage of Ecuador. She was the first female ambassador of Ecuador to the United Nations offices in New York and in Geneva. Most recently, Ms. Espinosa served as president of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly, becoming the fourth woman in history and the first from Latin America and the Caribbean to preside over this body. Ms. Espinosa is currently a member of the Strategic Committee of the Science Panel for the Amazon of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, member of the International Lancet COVID-19 Commission, counselor of the World Future Council, member of the Multi-Stakeholder Steering Committee of the Generation Equality Forum, member of the Political Advisory Panel of Universal Health Coverage 2030, member of the Group of Women Leaders for Change and Inclusion, and fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. Firstly, Maria, it's our great honor. Welcome to World Unity Week.
Thank you, Ben. I'm so thrilled to be here in such a good company with my dear friend Jonathan Granoff, with all of you, and thank you for having me. Thank you so much, because I see that this is a community of soul and heart and forward thinking, and we need so much of that these days. So thank you for this World Unity Week, and to and thank you again. I'm really thrilled to be here and to share this virtual space with all of you, and in particular with Jonathan this evening.
Wonderful. And Jonathan Granoff, our other keynote speaker, is attorney, author, and international advocate, emphasizing the legal, spiritual, and ethical dimensions of peace and security. He serves on numerous governing and advisory boards, including the World Academy of Arts and Science, the Jane Goodall Institute, and Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. He is a recipient of numerous awards, including the 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Bar Association International Law Section. He serves as the senior advisor to the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates and its representative to the United Nations, ambassador for peace, security, and nuclear disarmament of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and chair of the Task Force on Nuclear Non-Proliferation, and senior advisor to the Committee on National Security of the International Law Section of the American Bar Association. Mr. Granoff is the award-winning screenwriter of the Constitution, the document that gave birth to a nation, and a prolific author. He is a 2014 nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. It is such a great honor, Jonathan, to have you with us again in World Unity Week, and we're really excited about this conversation you're having with Maria on genuine human security. Jonathan, over to you.
Well, genuine security begins with the heart of individuals, because the relations between nations is really a relations between people. And I know Maria is going to flesh that out a little bit about how it really boils down to human relations. But real security largely comes from our upbringing, where we come from, the roots of our person, our parents, our community as children. And I want to go right into this dialogue and ask Maria where she came from, where she got her strength as a person to become ultimately one of the most influential people on the planet. And I'm just going to highlight an aspect of her that doesn't come out in the bio. When you delve into her academic, intellectual, heart interests, you discover a deep inquiry and investigation of the fabric of the forest keepers, the people of the Amazon, and particularly the women in the villages and clans and peoples that are the fabric that holds it together. That's a really important fabric of the human community that's so often overlooked because it's not part of the quest for power, quest for wealth, quest for recognition. But it's the people of the heart that keep the Amazon communities together. And if you look at her interests, it goes to the people of the heart. And that, to me, is evidence of a person who has done what Jane Goodall said we all have to do. Go on the journey from the head to the heart to the hand. And Maria is a person who's made that journey. So Maria, I want to ask you, where did you come from? How did you grow up? What was the foundation that gave you the strength to be the leader that you are?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, thank you for his very generous introduction. I was born in Spain, in Salamanca, in Spain, by accident, I would say, because my family is from Ecuador. I grew up in Ecuador, but I was born there because my father was studying law at the University of Salamanca. He had to escape Ecuador because it was a time of military dictatorships in Ecuador, and he had to leave the country. He was a university activist, a very active law student. And so he had to leave Ecuador, go to Spain to finish his career as a lawyer. So I was born there, but came back to Ecuador very early. And I grew up in Ecuador. I was very privileged because I went to a French school. French is my second language. And I fell in love with, since I was very, very small, I fell in love with poetry and with the power of words and the transformative power of discourse and words since I was a tiny little girl. My background is I'm a linguist by training, and I studied the relationship between culture and language. And one of my first professional experiences was to go, and I was trained as an ethno-linguist. My first job very early in my career was to assess the bilingual education programs for indigenous peoples in the Amazon, in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And when I arrived there, number one, I was a vegetarian. Number two, I come from the highlands. I grew up in Quito. It was my first contact with the tropical rainforest and with Amazonian indigenous peoples. And in that first contact, when I must have been, 21, 22 years old, that completely changed my life, I have to say, because I realized that it wasn't only about language. It wasn't not only about bilingualism, but it was an entire world of wisdom, of knowledge, and of a very sophisticated way of living, culturally completely different to what I grew up with. So it completely changed my life, even my professional choices. I studied geography. I'm a geographer by training after that. And I really learned to admire and appreciate the differences in we say cosmovisión in Spanish, but of worldview, in how language is an expression of the shaping of a world. And in one of the languages of the Amazon, there are 7 different words to say the color green, because the tropical rainforest is about different kinds of green meaning different ecosystems, because the tropical rainforest is a very diverse ecosystem. And just that, it completely woke up my, my whole Westernized epistemological training, and I became, I fell in love with the Amazon, with Amazonian cultures. I then worked for an NGO in Ecuador, working in the Amazon. I lived several years there. I lived with indigenous peoples, worked with them, learned from them. And I think it was, a life changer. Then when you're young, you think that you can change the world. And my passion was about defending and protecting the tropical rainforest, which it still is in a different way, but it still is, of course.
In a way, it's more the case. What was the largest epistemology of how we know things and what we think we know? My understanding of the indigenous people of the Amazon is that they view the natural world as inseparable from the human body, that we are part of the natural world. We are not a separate entity in the way the West looks at the world, and that therefore our own stability and identity is inextricably intertwined with the health of the natural world. Whereas in the Western view toward the natural world, it is basically a property, something that we can own and use. And one of the elements of property is the right of destruction. I have a house, I don't have a duty to give it to my children, I can burn it down, it's mine. There's a line in John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie where they're in a beautiful forest in the Northwest, and a guy's cutting it down, and he's asked, why are you doing this? He said, because it's mine, I own it. And this idea of ownership over nature rather than being part of nature, how does that play out in the lives of people? And how did that affect you, seeing that difference in worldviews?
Well, the first discovery was precisely what you are saying, Jonathan, is for us, Westerners, nature is something that happens outside our world. It's an object that you can own and transform and destroy. But it is something that is separate from humans, and for them, in most cultures, because you have to also keep in mind that there is a huge diversity of cultures in the Amazon, that they're very different. But in general terms, I would say nature is part of their. It's one, with humans. There is no separation. Nature is not an object. It is a subject of rights in a way. And it perhaps more importantly, nature, not only that nature has rights, the right to exist, the right to reproduce and multiply. But nature is also very much connected to the spiritual life of indigenous peoples. It is something sacred, and it is very much connected to the spiritual life of indigenous people. So it is not something that you overuse or you destroy because it is part of your own spirit in a way. So that is a major difference with Western epistemologies. It's one. And then I learned that very early when I had the privilege to serve as minister. I convinced the then president, that we should have a ministry of cultural and natural heritage together. And we had for several years that, and I was so privileged to be the Minister of Cultural and Natural Heritage, because basically what we did is design public policy that connected cultural with natural heritage, and to understand that they go together, that they needed to be protected, enhanced together. And I think that was part of my early learnings. And the other issue that we were able to change is that our constitution, the Ecuadorian constitution, has a chapter on the rights of Mother Nature. So in the Ecuadorian constitution, we recognize that nature has rights, and that society needs to respect and protect the rights of nature to exist. And I think that it's the only constitution in the world that has that. Of course, you are a lawyer, Jonathan, but and perhaps you can help because one of the challenges is the enforcement of these constitutional principles.
The country of Costa Rica has a declaration of interdependence that President Carazo helped obtain, declaring similarly that the natural world, the forests in particular, have value independent of market value. It's interesting that we are talking about security, and genuine security seems to me to be first and foremost coming back to this very breath of life that we share at this moment. That if you said to somebody, oh, you're very wealthy, you have $30 million, and you have a choice. You can keep your $30 million and you get 2,000 more breaths. And then you're done. Or you give up your $30 million and you get 2 million more breaths. What would the person do? How valuable is this breath? And the breath that you and I are breathing right now, part of the lungs of that breath are the upside down lungs of the trees, which are breathing us. So in many ways, the Amazon and the other forests are providing at least 30 to 50% of our oxygen. Correct. And then the idea that breath would be separate from us is simply illusory. The perception that our bodies and the forests are one is not a metaphor. It is reality. The idea that we can turn it into property is a metaphor. We create that, but God created the forest and our lungs. The other part of the oxygen that we breathe is largely a simple single cell organism called phytoplankton in the oceans, which interestingly provides at least 50 to 70% of our oxygen. And we don't have a political regime designed to adequately protect either the rainforests or the oceans. So in a sense, we are ignoring the most important link to our personal daily life security, our very breath itself. And one of the practices that I do for my own personal security is to spend time in a state of gratitude for this breath and this breath, and remembering that physically it is the forests and the oceans that are giving me this breath, and that the very breath of life itself is sacred, and therefore the Creator is giving me this breath. And I believe that the very most important part of personal security is developing a heart of gratitude. And the deeper one goes into gratitude in this life, the less fear you have of losing this life. It's a paradox. It's like the paradox of compassion. The more you care for others, the more you gain fulfillment yourself. But right now, and you saw this, you were in the crucible of this dynamic. Right now, the major powers of the world talk about security being obtained by a doctrine that they call strategic stability. And I've always thought that the people of the rainforest have a much more realistic understanding of stability. In other words, the discussions of strategic stability are largely about nuclear weapons and these massive arsenals of weaponry. And you were a minister of defense, so you understand this very well. This massive arsenals and lowering the risk of the using them, of having them, but not wanting to use them. Whereas we are ignoring the realism of strategic stability with the natural world, which we cannot ignore because it's reality. The strategic stability of weaponry is based on mythology, the mythology of the Roman adage, prepare for war, receive peace, peace through strength, prepare for peace, receive war, weakness breeds instability and war. And I wondered how you gain this profound wisdom, and then over a course of work, sacrifice, wisdom, you come to be the foreign minister of your country and then permanent representative to the UN, and then by virtue of the other diplomats recognizing your qualities and skill, voted president of the General Assembly. How did you integrate this deep knowledge of real security into the work you did at the UN?
Well, that's a tough question, because I think that when you have the understanding that you have, Jonathan, about what is the difference between value and price in issues that have incredible value for human life but have no price, and in like just breathing in how to take care of our commons, and that we are responsible for that. And basically, when you confront this understanding to real politics, then there is a big disenchantment in a way, because the world of politics sometimes is extremely frustrating. I decided to enter into politics because I thought I could make a difference and serve and transform and take decisions that are going to improve the lives of people, especially coming from a country and from a region. Yesterday, we presented the Human Development Report for Latin America. And I'm sad to say that Latin America has become the most unequal region of the world after Sub-Saharan Africa. And it is the region, the most violent region in the entire world. And there is a connection between inequalities, frustration, a trust deficit, poverty, and also the depletion and destruction of our natural world. And when you are a politician, you're called to provide solutions for that, to serve people in a way that you are going to improve their lives. And sometimes real politics, it's really very difficult to understand how power plays. You mentioned the issue of strategic stability and how indigenous peoples think about strategic stability in a very different way. And for the Western world, especially for the military powers of the world, strategic stability is about nuclear weapons and military expenditure. So we live in a world of paradox, because we have the knowledge, we have the technologies, we have the know-how to make our world a better place. And yet we don't. It's very difficult to explain why. And being in a leadership role at the UN, being the president of the General Assembly, you want to push the 193 countries to take the right decisions, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And I have to say it is frustrating. The politics is the struggle between what is achievable and what it's desirable. And you know, the desirable, it sometimes doesn't happen. And you have to just say, okay, this is what is possible to do. This is what is achievable. And there is a huge gap between an ideal situation, a common sense situation, and what is achievable in politics. And that's why I am asking you, because you're an expert on this. I mean, and nuclear disarmament, I mean, the nuclear race is about the key deterrence strategy for nuclear countries. And we know that it doesn't work. You said, Jonathan, that it's really a mirage. It doesn't work like that. So is there any chance, any hope to see the disarmament agenda, the nuclear disarmament agenda, you know, reach some kind of, or, you know, a hope, a window and or a door for the disarmament agenda, especially nuclear disarmament. Now that I was in Geneva when we mandated the General Assembly to negotiate the treaty for total elimination of nuclear weapons, and countries are not ratifying. Even countries that are, you know, no nuclear states, they're not ratifying this treaty. Why is that? Why is this very difficult to understand a power play that we know it's a mirage, and it really puts humanity in risk?
I think your studies of anthropology and mythology are the key to understanding the totemic nature of this symbol of power. The paradox of nuclear weapons is the paradox of modernity. It's improved means to unimproved ends. The more we perfect the weapon, the less security we obtain. We have largely lost common purpose and focus. In a sense, I call it the forgotten why. It's like medicine without healing, financial system without focus on goods and services. It's focused on the how, not the why. So finance grows, but goods and services don't. It's art without beauty, philosophy about the methodology of philosophy, not the pursuit of truth. And it is education without character, and it is weapons without security. The how itself has overtaken the why. We've forgotten the why. I think that this moment that Mother Nature has given us at a high cost for many people, with this small virus that you can't see with your eyes, that doesn't carry a passport, that has affected the entire world and caused millions of people, thoughtful people all over the world to confront their own personal values in their lives, like a timeout, a retreat, and realize that we are indeed one human family. This truth, the truth is the financial world has recognized the unity of the world. Finance now, because we've created third-party adjudication of disputes through the arbitration system, finance, commerce has gone global. Every single country in the world is integrated into one system. Culture has gone global, for good or bad. Fashion has gone global. Culinary arts have gone global. Franchising has gone global. Medicine has gone global. Science has long ago gone global. The only institution that hasn't gone global is the military political. And they're operating based on mythology. I believe that this is the moment to put forward a human security agenda. So hopeful. So I'll give you some hopeful things. We have in the last decades, a consensus of the leaders and nations of the world in the Sustainable Development Goals that we can and should eliminate gender inequity. We can and should eliminate the destruction of the natural world. We can and should eliminate poverty. We can, and when you start going down the road to fulfill those commitments in the Sustainable Development Goals that the nations of the world have agreed upon, nuclear weapons have no place in that world. Thus, we can see right now, there was a nascent nuclear arms race in Latin America, and one man, a diplomat from Mexico, Ambassador Robles, came forward and said, let's create a nuclear weapons-free world. Let's start with Latin America, the Caribbean, and Central America. So you have 33 nations in a nuclear weapons-free zone under the Treaty of Tlatelolco. Stop the race between Brazil and Argentina. So there's no likelihood of a war going on. So it really has, although there's a lot of domestic violence and neighborhood violence, there's unlikely to have a major war amongst nations. And you had the heads of states, CELAC, of Latin America, declaring that the very possession of nuclear weapons is a crime against humanity. From that, we now have the Treaty of Pelindaba, making the entirety of Africa a nuclear weapons-free zone. We have the Treaty of Astana, making the entirety of Central Asia a nuclear weapons-free zone. The Treaty of Bangkok, making Southeast Asia a nuclear weapons-free zone. The Treaty of Rarotonga, they're like the poetry of these treaties. The fact is, the majority of countries in the world, the entirety of the Southern Hemisphere, is virtually nuclear weapons-free by treaty, by agreement of the nations of those regions saying, we don't view these weapons as enhancing our security. There is a commitment under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty for global nuclear disarmament, but there's also a commitment to pursue a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East that all 191 countries of that treaty agreed as part of the process of the agreement to extend the treaty indefinitely. So we have a treaty with a commitment to disarmament that has really stopped the proliferation of the weapons that all but 4 countries in the world are parties to. But I think that what's missing is an integrating principle that ties these siloed activities together. And that's why I believe the concept of human security is so important, because we create states, they're creations of law. And so here's an example. In India and Pakistan, which are squared off with nuclear arms, right? 70% of the malnourished children on the planet are in those 2 countries. 30% of the children in both India and Pakistan are suffering from malnutrition. And yet they're spending huge amounts of money to build these weapons that they can't use. And in the United States, we're seeing homeless people by the thousands. And yet we've pledged over $1 trillion to modernize and make more usable, whatever that means, nuclear weapons. So we're at a moment of choice. We're at a moment of choice. And I think that the kind of insight that you have expressed, that this tension between what we know is possible and the imprisonment, I would say, the imprisonment that the nations of the world are bound into from these mythical thinking, has to change. And the people we're talking to in this discussion are people who I believe are personally committed to helping make that change. And you are one of the leaders in our life to help make that change. Because part of that change has to be women's leadership. Part of that change has to be recognizing the sacredness of the natural world. And part of that change has to be recognizing the human capacity to do things that are beautiful, to create beautiful things, not just to get by and be sustained, but to regenerate the beauty of being human. And that's why poets are so important. That poets, poets are really important because they unpack our hearts and our thoughts. And, in my estimation, there's a poetry to politics. It is trying to infuse the virtue of justice and beauty into the affairs of state. And I regret that you were president of the General Assembly while we had leaders of many states who were pursuing the lowest aspect of our human endeavor, male dominant egoism. And also 5 aspiring empires: Persia, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, all aspiring to be empires, not to mention the expanding militarization of the planet put forward by my country, the United States. So
wow.
How did you maintain your balance in the midst of a very difficult time to be presiding over the General Assembly?
Well, to be very frank with you, I am not a person that can keep balance very well. I have been, workaholic for so many years. Since I was a little girl, I feel responsible in a way for the world, and it's very, very difficult to keep harmony in your own life when you are so much aware of that something dysfunctional is happening in our world. And when you see what is happening with the COVID-19 pandemic and how weak we have been as humanity to respond to the pandemic in all fronts, from a multilateral governance, we see what is happening with COVAX, from, sometimes the lack of cooperation between the scientific community, lack of integration, cooperation, and solidarity among countries, the inadequacy of the response of countries that have politicized the pandemic and used the pandemic as a political tool. So you see that there is something fundamentally wrong. So how to maintain, how to be cool about it, it's impossible for a person like me. And I sometimes I physically suffer when we have meetings of the Lancet Commission on COVID, which I am part of. And when you hear the vaccinologists, the epidemiologists from Oxford and from all these very important scientists bringing the hard and naked data on the pandemic, you just hold your head and you see, why is this happening? In Brazil, in India, in so many countries. Why is that the G7 is telling the developing world, which hasn't been able to vaccinate, not even 10% of the population? They're saying, okay, in a way, the leftovers of our vaccines we will donate to the developing countries, but it's not good enough. We need a really well-organized system, multilateral system, to ensure that vaccines are available universally for free, and that humanity can become immune to this virus. So for me, the COVID-19 pandemic is a metaphor of what is happening in the world. And when we speak about the climate crisis what are the key threats to human security that you were mentioning, of course, the weapons and nuclear weapons, but also climate change and pandemics. And there are symptoms. They're not problems. They're symptoms. And there are symptoms of a more profound illness. And this more profound illness is that we have gone beyond limits with nature. We all know that, the COVID-19 illness, it's a zoonotic disease. It is nature speaking to us, saying you have to respect the boundaries. You have to respect our carrying capacity. It is the way of nature telling humans, you have to just, stop. And climate change is the same. Climate change is displacing millions of people every day, every year. Climate refugees, floods and heat waves, and people being hungry and droughts. It's again nature saying, just stop, because the atmosphere is a common good of humanity. So it is not fair that some overuse the atmospheric space and others suffer the consequences. So, there is I would say, a schizophrenia of the way human societies interact with the natural world. And this is, in my opinion, the worst threat to our human security. So it is not fixing a little bit, the climate crisis with more renewable energy, fixing a little bit the food crisis, improving, our food systems here and there. It's like putting Band-Aids, but the true story, and it is a different social contract. The Secretary General said we need to make peace, but I would say a reconciliation between humans and nature. We need to reconcile, first of all, among humans, with respect and solidarity and tolerance, and we need to reconcile with nature. And I know that these are very profound things, and the important thing is to see how this reconciliation can happen in the real world, with real politics, with real decision makers, with our leaders. And I am not a person that believes that the world is going to be fixed by messianic leaders, by one or two. It's a societal transformation. And that's why I really thank and celebrate this World Unity Week, Ben, because I think it is a transformation on our personal lives, in our communities. It's at all scales and levels that we need to operate. And when you're given the opportunity, just speed up. When I was the president of the General Assembly, I worked 7 days a week. Believe me, day and night, and traveled here and there and went to refugee camps. And so we don't have time to waste. And going back to your question with a very long answer, but how to keep the balance. And now I hear people saying, your life-work balance, spiritual, physical balance. And I'm ashamed to say that, but I'm really a really bad example for that. I'm too passionate and I feel too responsible. And power is something that comes and goes very quickly. So if you're given a little bit of power, even in your neighborhood, just grab it. And especially for us, for women, we have to struggle so much to be in positions of leadership and power that when we have it, just grab it and try to make the changes you can as fast as you can. And then, sit but never rest, continue to struggle, continue to live by your principles and pursue your dreams. There is no recipe for that, but of course that's how we have to live in a chaotic world like the one we live in.
I think that by virtue of your commitment to service in this way, that maybe from the side of the world it looks imbalanced, but from the larger picture, to me it looks very balanced, and I can see the energy and power that flows through you. I think that if we use the metrics of the world for our own evaluation, we would conclude that Socrates was a great failure. 500 of his countrymen sentenced him to death. Jesus would be a great failure. The 12 of them forgot about him by the time the cock crowed in the morning. The metrics of the world for success don't really match up with the metrics of real success of a human life. And it seems to me that there are some principles. For example, when nations treat other nations as they want to be treated, stability occurs. Juxtapose the reparations that were imposed on Germany after World War I, we reaped the chaos of Nazism. Juxtapose that with the Marshall Plan, in which we ended up with virtue in policy, trading partners, and two democracies. We treated the vanquished the way we wanted to be treated. We created the UN system. I think that is an example of how what is personally creates security in your personal life, to treat others as you want to be treated and to see the dignity and value of others, actually works amongst nations. But and it works in the marketplace as well. When you provide a service and a good that helps people, you create wealth. When you exploit people, you have an unsustainable business. And there are ideas now, human security being one of them, that could be transformative. I think I boil it down to sort of this formula: love people and use things. Never love things to use people. And one of the things that we have is the nation state. This is a thing which has become an end in itself. So we pursue security, the security of the state, without looking at the security of the people. And that is the adjustment that I think we need to make. By the way, when the pandemic first began, I wrote an article in Newsweek highlighting that nationalism is inadequate to address it. But I did some research beforehand, and I called Jonas Salk's son, Jonas Salk, who created the polio vaccine, and asked him, how did his father deal with the patent? And he referred me to an interview that he had with Edward R. Murrow, a great journalist, in which he was asked, who owns the patent? And Jonas Salk said, the people own the patent. You can't patent the sunlight. And as we know, we have eliminated the scourge of polio and smallpox because they were treated as global, that the cure was treated as a global common good. So we know how to do it. And I think that one of the things we need is more poetry in action, the poetry of the open heart, the poetry of politicians guided by soulfulness, and the poetry of poets putting themselves into public discourse. I see that we're coming to the end of this in terms of time. Ben, do we have a little more time?
That would be up to Maria. We have time, but I'm just concerned about Maria's schedule.
Oh, okay. Maria, I think we want to honor the time here, and I wondered if you could. Could you share one of your poems with us?
Yes, but I cannot agree more with you, Jonathan. I keep saying sometimes when I was appointed Minister of Defense of my country, there was two fundamental problems. One, I was a female, I was a woman. And number two, I mean, no one even, bothered to look at my CV, that I studied geopolitics, that I have written about security issues and all of that. And basically the headlines in newspapers in Ecuador, and you can go find them, and they say, not only she's a woman, but she's a poet. This is crazy to have a poet as Minister of Defense. And there was a lot of joking. And after that moment, whenever I stood up of the army, and they always commented on the way I was dressed and the color of my dress and things like that. Well, so there is a lot to do, but I kept saying that we would be much better off if we had more poetry in politics. And one of the things that I have learned during these years is that the power, again, I said that, but the transformative power of words, how important discourse is, how much you can shape the world with words. And the truth is that in politics, what matters is discourse and how you're able to articulate, narratives. And we should not take this for granted, because what we are experiencing is people losing trust in democratic institutions, in the multilateral system, in politics, in political parties. Latino Barometro, it's a barometer for Latin America. The last information I have seen is that 9 out of 10 people in Latin America do not trust political parties. And this is really bad news for our democracies. And in other words, we need to make sure that we really honor our words and what we say, and to do what we say.
That's what George Shultz said ended the Cold War. He said the currency of the realm that ended the Cold War was trust. And Orwell said one of the first things that tyrannical dictators and authoritarians do is divest language of its meaning and cause the people to lose their confidence in the truth, that there is truth to be told. And I can't emphasize enough how important what you just said is, that the words we tell ourselves, the words we tell others, the prayers that we put into our heart, put ourselves into prayer, the words are the direction that we go. And if we become cynical about telling the truth, and we don't understand the power and the gift of language that God has given us, it's as if we cut off our legs to move. We cut off our arms to share, and we're left as an empty corpse without the ability to connect. Because through words we connect our hearts and our ideas. When the public discourse is bereft of meaning, when treaties, for example, which are the way nations talk to each other, are ignored or minimized, when treaties are minimized, bullets become the words, because we have no other way. When we move from the power of law is done by words. When we move from the power of law and divest the importance of agreements, we end up with the law of power, which is utterly unsustainable. So I think honoring not only the words, but the integrity behind it. And Maria, I want to say publicly, you don't realize when you were president of the General Assembly, one of the things you did was you empowered activists like myself by dignifying the role of civil society in the process, by at every opportunity honoring civil society. Your office was open to us. You made the time to show up and to say to civil society, we value your ideas. Because one of the things in the international system is civil society and the people in this conversation globally that are watching, we are not bound by having to represent our nation. You know, when I practice law, I have to represent my client. When you're a civil society advocate, your responsibility is to the truth and to the whole. And right now, the spiritual admonition of the wise to see the human family as one has, as you pointed out, this has become a practical necessity. We can't, if we have a vaccine apartheid world, we won't address this pandemic or pandemics to come.
Absolutely.
The metaphor of the pandemic, and it goes, I think, to this distortion in which we are worshiping the things we create, nations, corporations, property, and ignoring the reality that we're given, which is we are one family, we are part of the natural world. That's a reality. And we're ignoring reality and worshiping what we create. Oh God, you have a poem.
Wes, yes, I asked my husband to bring me a book because I don't want to be operating my computer to find an English version. This book is called Tortured Geographies, and it's every poem. It's in a different part of the world where I have been, and in a very short poem, it's going to be in Spanish. Apologies. But it's called The Golden Fish from Arizona, and El Pez Dorado de Arizona. And I will read it very quickly in Spanish, sorry. En agua prieta, desierto de Arizona, vive el pez dorado. Tiene una memoria que dura 3 segundos. Vive solo en el presente, nada sin parar. Reinventa todo a cada instante, pero no llega a ninguna parte, porque su camino es siempre otro. El pez dorado olvida su nombre, olvida el amor, olvida su propósito, sus hijos, sus padres. Es como la historia escrita por los poderosos. Está hecha con una memoria de apenas 3 segundos, para que nadie recuerde la guerra o la noche. La historia que guarda el pez dorado es como la nuestra, dura apenas 3 segundos. Nuestros dolores se repiten y parecen nuevos cada vez. Well, this poem is about the golden fish of Arizona. And you know that the golden fish has a memory of 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, the fish forgets everything and starts to live again. And it's a metaphor to say that the history that we are told by the powerful has the same memory than the golden fish. It lasts 3 seconds, and that's why we repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So that is the metaphor, and it says that when we are told the story by the powerful, it's because they want us to forget the pain and the war and hunger. And we start over again. So that's what and I promise, Jonathan, I will find the English version and send it to you by mail. And if someone is interested, we can share it with Ben and with whoever. And I will send by PDF some of my poems in English when I find them.
Nothing could be more important than remembering ourselves, remembering the most important part of ourselves, and remembering and digging and finding the principles that have worked and studying what has caused terrible suffering. And I think it is simply the idolatry of worshiping things that we create and a lack of gratitude for the fact that we are breathing the forests, we are breathing the oceans, and we are breathing together. That's why spirit, the root word in many languages of spirit, breath, and soul are the same root. Our very breath is our connectivity. And if we can change the focus of how security is pursued from the state as an end in itself to the security of people, to human security, to how do people live in their daily lives, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the topsoil has to be protected. The biological systems and regenerative processes of nature are sacred. They're not just things to be used up, they're sacred. Could I give a poem? And we could go out with a poem. I got one.
Oh, please! We cannot have a better way to close this conversation. Please,
Okay.
Please do.
So your poem was about geography, about going places, or the book is. So here is one. There are places the mind can go that the senses cannot go. There are places that the intellect can go that the mind cannot go. There are places that wisdom can go that the intellect cannot go. There are places that grace can go that wisdom cannot even go. And there are places that love can go that even grace can't go. For love alone can take us home. May we all go home.
May we all go home. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria Espinosa. This was just a taste. There are so many comments in the chat. Jonathan, people want to continue the conversation on the Unify Facebook thread, a suggestion from Rachel, I think it was. And there's so much more to discuss. I just wanted to thank you for your time and also to acknowledge that this conversation is very, very special, Maria and Jonathan, in World Unity Week, because we have got transformational conversations happening in business, the donut economics. There is transformational conversations in science. David Sloan Wilson changing the story of evolutionary biology and higher education and learning with Otto Scharmer. But what you're bringing really is in politics, perhaps the most challenging of all human fields. I wanted to raise up, it was almost 60 years ago when John F. Kennedy said, we're looking for a gradual evolution, not a revolution in human nature. And of course, we would never expect a revolution in human nature, but we can hope for a revolution in the stories we tell ourselves. And I just love, Maria, that the first thing in your an extraordinary bio says Ecuadorian poet. So we'd love to continue this conversation. Are we looking for an evolution or a revolution? These institutions that have the power, are they going to give them away? What do we need to do, Jonathan, to get to genuine global and personal human security? I feel like this is an enormous conversation, and we've just taken a step today. So thank you so much, Maria, for your time and your wisdom and your beauty and your grace and your leadership. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. And thank you, Brother Jonathan, for facilitating this and everything you're doing for the security of the human family and for life on Earth. We're very, very honored to have you with us. And thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much for having me again. Thank you, Jonathan, dear brother in arms. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ben. And thank you to your community for this invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for
Take care.
saying
God
yes.
bless.
Ben, thank you so much. And not only you, the whole team you've put together of people, giving so much of their heart and time for the most precious, the most precious thing. And politics is just the space, working the space between us. But you brought people to the space within us where our unity is. And we've got to bring that space within us into the space between us.